and welcome to the Families Ministry Workshop here at the Joined Up Conference. My name is Rachel and I'm going to be with you for the next half an hour to an hour, just chatting through a little bit more about how we can connect with them all, how we can really use our families ministry. Now, families have changed unrecognisably from the 2.4 children nuclear family that we might aspire to. In this session, we're going to be exploring what families are really like in 2021, what they want, how we can reach them, and we'll be exploring how families ministry is central to a flourishing church and how everything else actually really just feeds in or feeds out of it. And there's going to be lots of ideas and examples. So I'm going to start off by introducing myself and welcoming you all here. Now, my name is Rachel. I've been a youth, children's and families worker at St Lawrence Church in Hatfield on the edge of Doncaster for just over a year now, which isn't very long really. Before that, I worked in the charity sector. So you may say that I don't have very much experience. What can I tell you that you don't already know? But I have been involved voluntarily in such a wide cross-section of youth, children's and families activities in the church since being a teenager myself, that I might possibly say, but probably not, that I've seen it all. I've been a girl guiding leader for Rainbows Guides and Senior Section. I've led ministry sessions on camps for urban saints. I've been on Sunday school teams, toddler groups, mums Bible studies, messy church, and I've probably missed some things out. But I have been involved in lots of different things. So in short, I feel unqualified to be here, but God threw me into the deep end last January when I joined the Centenary Project, and has shown me over the last year just how powerful and amazing families work especially is. Hopefully I can share that passion with you today and some other things and some other information that will help you in your own family's ministry, whatever context you find yourself in. The other thing you need to know about me is that I'm a mum. I'm not going to tell you my age, but it's definitely over 30. I've got two boys aged 5 and 7. And I've been on the receiving end of families ministry. And to be honest, I'm still figuring out how to effectively teach faith at home with my own family. I like to be real about my successes and my failings, and my attempts, and you can follow me at Rachel Youth Worker on Facebook if you want to see what I'm getting up to. So I hope that you feel welcome in this session, wherever you're at in your journey of families ministry, whether you've not done any, whether you're quite experienced. I'm going to be real and I'm going to be honest. I am not the biggest expert, but I hope that I can share something of value with you today. So about this session, here is a quick run through of what we're going to be going through. So number one, we're going to be talking about defining your family's ministry. What is it? How has it changed? Why is it important? Different places will be really different, and we're going to talk about that. But families ministry, like when I started my job, I didn't know. I could say youth work. I know what that is. Children's work. I know what that is. Families worker. I don't know what that is. So we're going to define what families ministry is and what your family's ministry is. Number two, we're going to look at finding your flows. So what feeds into your family's ministry and what feeds out of it and why that is important. And number three, this is a fun, the creative bit that hopefully you're going to grab some ideas from. And we're going to look at capitalising on COVID. Now, it's been a rough year. After 3 months of being in my job, we were plunged into COVID and trying to figure out how to do families ministry in lockdown. But I haven't let that stop me. And we've been creative, and we're going to talk about funding, creativity and community, and how actually we can use COVID to build our family's ministry. Hopefully you're going to find some printable worksheets on the Joined Up website that go along with this workshop to help you think and plan for your own family's ministry in your own context. So to start us off today, I thought I'd just tell you a little bit about where I work and the context that I am ministering into. It's likely that some of yours might be quite similar, but it's also possible that some of your contexts will be very, very different. Now, you'll notice today that I'm in my home office. I am working from home. I'm following the guidance from Boris to work from home where possible. And that means that actually over the last year, I've not been inside my church building an awful lot or in the office space that we've got. So this here is St. Lawrence Church. It's in a nice leafy suburb of Doncaster, and we like to think that we're a posh little village. But a 10-minute walk from this building will bring you out in deprived areas that used to be centred around mining, that are very run down and not as nice as the leafy suburb we like to think we are. We have a church school, but we also have 4 other primary schools, a special school and a secondary school, all within our parish boundaries. So that's quite a lot. When lockdown hit, 3 months into me starting the role here, the only non-Sunday morning ministry that was running was Messy Church. I had no youth group, I had no schoolwork, I had no other groups, I had no children's after school things, just nothing. The only thing that I had was Messy Church. And Messy Church, if you've not investigated, please do go onto their website, onto their Facebook, their social media, and find out more about it. It is all about families. It is intergenerational, it's fun, it's creative, and it's welcoming. It's everything that we want our families ministry to be. And so I ran with that. It was the only thing I had. For the first few months of lockdown, I was sending out postal craft packs. I was appearing on Facebook Live videos with my 7-year-old son. It did not go well, but it grew, and so did those recognising me out in the community, on my daily walks, chatting to me, and relationships with local people really, really grew. I'm not local, we moved here almost 3 years ago now, and sometimes in little villages that can be quite a hard barrier to overcome. So this was my foundation for growth. Out of this, I launched a socially distant staycation summer club, which ran with 50 children for the 6 weeks summer holidays. We launched a new virtual children's choir, a uniform bank, and a successful schools ministry into 4 out of the 5 local primary schools. There is still so much more for me to do here, but I'm blown away by how God has taken this basic building block of families ministry, of Messy Church, and grown it out from there. So let's get started on our workshop, and hopefully we can help you to grow something in the same way. Our first thing to look at is defining our families' ministries. Now, before I start on that, I just want to recommend one book and resource for you. If you really want to dig deeper into this subject, this is a book that I read during the first lockdown, and it really inspired me. It got me thinking, and I can say it's probably inspired a lot of stuff in this session. So it's called The Essential Guide to Family Ministry, and it's by Gail Adcock. Now, this isn't my copy of the book. I actually lent it to another children's and families worker, and to really inspire them in their ministry. Fantastic. So we know that families have changed so much in the last few decades, that blended families, step families, adopted families, extended families, there are so many variations of family now. And to be honest, as a mum with 2 children, married to the same person since I've been 21, I am kind of the odd one out now. Every community will have a different makeup of families too. So I want you to spend the next few minutes just jotting down what kind of families you think you find in your ministry setting, in your town, your village, your city. Are they blended families? Are they step families? Adopted? Are they single parent families? Are they nuclear families? So there are a mum and a dad and 2 kids. Pause the video now if you want a little bit of time to think about this. So why is this question important? Why is it important to define what kind of families we have? Well, we need to understand this before we can decide how best to reach them. If you live in a place where most families are single parent ones, with dads not involved, they're out of the picture. then running a Who Let the Dads Out programme isn't really going to work. But if you minister in a place where there are lots of step families, then you might find that weekends aren't great for family ministry activities because the children maybe aren't there, maybe they're with their other parents for the weekend. If you live in a place where there are lots of working parents, then after school times probably won't be great. They won't be well attended because they'll all still be working, and the children might be at grandparents or babysitters or childminders. I can't tell you what will or won't work in your context. There are so many ideas out there, so many tools, so many concepts that you can use. But until you understand your audience, there's no point on deciding which one to use. Families ministry is also so very, very vague. I find it really hard splitting up some of my activities into my job description of youth, children's and families worker, as actually a lot of the time it's reaching the parents, the grandparents, the children and other congregation members too. And sometimes what we might define as children's work actually has a great impact on the parents. And so then technically it could be families ministry. So if you have defined what you think your target families are in your local area, we're going to move on to use another really useful tool. And it's called the SWOT analysis. I'm sure lots of you have heard of this, and hopefully there is a free printable worksheet on the Joined Up Conference website. Now, if you don't have access to a printer at home or you can't get onto the website, don't worry. You can be an amazing children's and families worker by whipping up your own version really quickly. So we're just going to divide a page into 4 sections, and we're going to put the letters of SWOT. So S, W, O and T, and they stand for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. So if we start in the strengths box, what already works well in your ministry? What are you already doing at church that seems to be clicking with the people around you? So when I started my ministry and Messy Church was working well, we had 80 people attending Messy Church in person. So it was clear that this concept, this way of doing church and families ministry was connecting with the families. That I know that before I started there, they tried to do this at different times of the week. They tried doing it after school or on a Friday night at like 3-4 o'clock, and it hadn't worked. Instead, they moved it to the Sunday morning slot when a service would normally be, and did it instead of the family service. And it grew and it flourished. And I think that's because where we live in this little suburb on the edge of Doncaster, there are a lot of working parents. And so after school times really didn't work. So when you can see what already works well, mark that down and think, why do you think that is? Is it reaching to one of those defined members of the kind of the context that you're in? Is it really speaking to those families that are near you? What skills or volunteers do you have that could help you going forward? So real strength is in our volunteer team. Is there a teacher? Is there someone who has a particular gifting in music or craft or sports? And people who are really gifted and have a passion for things will help to drive things forward and make them successful. And those will be our strengths. So pause the video here if you want to think about that and write some things down now. So you'll see I've written down some of the strengths of my own ministry. We have lots of older ladies who are really great at craft and really passionate about that. So that crafty volunteer base really drives our Messy Church. And also we found that it targets those working families who want to spend time together. They want to do fun things as a family together at the weekend. And Messy Church really plays into that. So next, we're going to come and look at our weaknesses. Now, sometimes we don't like to talk about weaknesses. Now, I've already said at the beginning of this video that I am quite happy to talk about my failings. I fail every day at something, normally getting breakfast ready or, not shouting at my children. So, you know what? If you started something in the past and it failed, That's okay. That's a really important thing to spend time thinking about, and thinking, why did it fail? That's not a bad thing. Sometimes it's a good thing when things fail. So think about the things that you've tried that have failed. Why do you think that is? Now, this isn't families related, but at the start of COVID, everybody was, all of my youth worker and children and family worker friends were starting youth groups on Zoom, and they were doing lots of fun games on Zoom, and all of their young people were connecting with it. And I thought, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to jump on that bandwagon. I'm sure there are some young people in my church who would be up for that. And I set up a Zoom session for the youth. Twice I did it and nobody turned up. It was a massive fail. But why do I think that is? And I think it's because the place that we live, our parents are really protective of their young people, and they were scared of this new thing of Zoom. They didn't know if it was safe, and the young people as well didn't know me. I'd only been there a few months. They'd not had a chance to get to know me, and so those are the reasons why it failed. But looking at that, I can go, well, that was the weakness of those things. Let's not do the same thing, but let's either try to work on those to make it work in the future, or look at something different. So if there's a reason why that failed, let's think, well, actually, those young people need to have in-person contact. They need a chance to build up a relationship with me. And so we can take something that's a weakness and plan something new out of that. So what have you tried that's failed? Why do you think it failed? Is it not actually directed at your target audience, at the families in your local area? Are you not recognising what they need? What are you lacking as a church to support your families? Are you lacking volunteers? Are you lacking funding? What are the weaknesses? Is there only you? Is there no one else that can help with the work? That is a weakness. And often that is the case, that there's not as many volunteers as we want. So pause the video here, fill in your weaknesses box, and then we'll move on to the next one. Fantastic. So I've filled in my weaknesses, that it wasn't in person and that there were no personal connections there, so it wasn't going to work. I wonder what you've put in. Maybe you could share a photo with us and the Joined Up Conference team later on social media. So the next one we're going to move on to is opportunities. Now, this is where I get excited. I'm always thinking of new opportunities. I'm always seeing new opportunities wherever I go. I'm like, oh, there's a gap. Oh, there's something. Oh, and sometimes I have to slow my brain down and stop. And I'm sure if my line managers are watching, they would agree with this. So when we're thinking about opportunities, it's things that we're not doing yet, but things that we could be doing. So the questions that I want you to think about are, what other groups and activities flourish in your area? So maybe after school clubs flourish because parents need that time. Maybe sports things flourish because that's what people are really interested to. Take a little bit of time, either digitally or out walking about your local area, and see what things really work and what things are people interested in. What posts on your local Facebook community forums get noticed and get seen, and what doesn't? Maybe that's something that can tell you something about what your local area needs. What is missing, where the church could fill a gap? Now that's where I jumped in and started a uniform bank that actually we went, you know what, that is missing. There is a whole, there is a group of people that maybe have been furloughed or just can't afford it, just in different pockets of our community, and yet we've been off school and there's all this uniform that's gone unused, and it could be recycled, it could be reused, it could be put to good use. That is a gap that us as a church could fill and minister to those families. So there'll be whole heaps of opportunities, I'm sure, and I'm really excited to see what you come up with. So do pause the video there and spend a bit of time writing down the opportunities. Oh, well, I hope you've had lots of fun filling in that box. I've included about my uniform bank, and also like a big opportunity I saw when we were in lockdown one was the fact that a lot of us would be staying at home more often. And that might be the same this year. I know the government have said, don't book your foreign holidays yet. We don't know if it's going to be safe. And so actually there's a big opportunity that lots more families are going to be around locally with not as many things open that are going to need stuff to keep their families and their children occupied. And so last year we grabbed that opportunity and we organised the Socially Distant Staycation Summer Club, which is an opportunity for us to get to know new families, to provide something for the families we already knew, and to really meet a need in our community. So I wonder what opportunities you've got. The last one is not a nice one. I don't like this one. Is threats. Now, we maybe don't like to think about threats. We like to think of church in this nice, cosy little bubble. But actually, there are things in that will possibly potentially harm our ministry. So what things in your context could harm it? Is there a long-running negative feeling towards the church in general? And so actually, even if you spot an opportunity, you've got the team to do it, you launch something, and actually the community just doesn't really engage with the church because of something historical. Maybe there's something that needs addressing and dealing with first. What conflicts of time, interest and attention are there? If you're in a community where there's a big kind of Sunday football league following, that is a conflict of time and interest for a lot of families now, and that they want their children to be involved in sport. And so if you plan something and launch it on a Sunday morning when all of the football leagues are running, that's a conflict of time, that's a threat. Nobody's going to want to come or be able to come to your amazing family ministry activity when they're going to be at that. Perhaps even just the building or the car parking where you are, the entranceway, the doorway, the light. Just think about what actually could harm this activity and stop it from being a success. And those are things that we're going to want to pray through. We're going to want to bring to God. We're going to want to maybe look and find some practical solutions to those before we start our family's ministry. So we're going to move on now to the second part of our workshop, which is called Finding Your Flows. So I'm going to say something a little bit controversial now. Family's ministry is the centre of everything. Now, hear me out here. You might be a Sunday school teacher, a stalwart Sunday morning servicer. You might be thinking, no, what has she just said? Well, Jesus came to reach everyone with the gospel, with the good news that he was bringing of life with God through him. He didn't just come for the adults who would sit nice and quietly in the pews on a Sunday morning. He didn't just come for the children with their innocence and their eagerness and their keenness to hear. He didn't just come for the youth who were vigorous and kind of interested and excited to learn more. But he came for every single one of us. He came for the grandparents, the parents, the children, the single people, the youth. And he came to make us, the church, the family of God. So family's ministry, in my opinion, is core to everything that the church is about. It is inclusive to all ages, all types of people, and every other activity that we do and every other ministry should either feed into it or it should feed out of it. Now, just to back up what I've said there, I want to read you a passage from Acts chapter 2, and it's about the first church, the early church, the new believers in Jesus just after he had died and risen again. And it's from Acts chapter 2, verse 42 to 47. And it says, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favour of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. Now in that passage, it doesn't say just the adults, it doesn't say the older people, it doesn't say the children were excluded. It talks about the new fellowship of believers as a family all together, having dinner in their homes together, sharing. And I don't think the children were excluded. I don't think the older people were excluded. I think it was everyone all together. This beautiful picture of families ministry and what it can be. You know what? We sometimes talk about, I think we think about it as if it's the people with young children and the parents, and that is it. That is the group that we are targeting with families ministry. But no, it reaches so much further than that. It reaches to the grandparents. It reaches to the single people who are spiritual mothers and fathers, grandparents, uncles, aunties, brothers and sisters. Families ministry, in my opinion, is the core of what church is. And that doesn't mean there isn't a place for all these other specific things, these other times and places when we need to be with people who are like us. But it means actually that we come back, that in the centre of it, church is a family. And what we do where everybody is included, families ministry where everybody is included, that is the core of church. That is the heart of church. And I want you to grasp that and run with that today, everybody. I want you to go, you know what? Sunday mornings are amazing. For me as an adult, I'm built up and encouraged. I get to meet with people. The children get their time to go and have Sunday school and learn in a way that is appropriate for them. But that's not church as a family. That is ministries that separate us into our places and do something targeted at us. You know which bit is the family ministry? It's the end. When we all come together, and I know we haven't got this at the moment, and it's really hard, and we have to really work hard to create these moments. It's that bit at the end, that messy, crazy bit at the end where everybody's having tea and coffee and there are kids running around, but they're talking to other people in church and they're sharing about their week. That is more church than anything else. That is when we are a family together. That is when relationships grow, when friendships blossom, when God moves and works amongst us all. So now I've said my controversial bit, I'm going to share another diagram with you, and I want you to either draw this or find the template on the Joined Up Conference website. So this is my diagram. So in the middle here you can see I've got families ministry, the thing that is core to church. And here we're going to have things that are coming in, that are feeding into it. And here we're going to have things that are feeding out of it. Now, you might already have lots of things that your church does and your ministry does, or you might not. You might have nothing at the moment. That's okay. So I'm going to give you some examples of things that are inflows to families ministry. So things that, if I use my example of the families ministry we've got here, which is Messy Church, everyone is welcome at Messy Church. Yes, people might think it's more aimed at children because there are crafts and things like that, but everybody is welcome to come and take part. Everyone can be part of the celebration. We have grandparents and older people who are the volunteers on the tables. It is a family thing. So feeding into that, we might have some of these things. So schools work, as important as it is to speak to the children and get the positive messages of the gospel and Bible stories and things into the school, actually, in my opinion, it's a lot about advertising and pointing people towards what we're doing at church. You know what? At Christmas time, I did a lot of assemblies. I did a lot of collective worship on Zoom, which is really hard and really frustrating. But instead of just doing a story, I thought I'm going to do something that feeds in to what we are doing in our families ministry at church. And so we were doing a Messy Church sheep trail around our village for Christmas. And so all of my assemblies we're talking about sheep, we're introducing the sheep trail. So I talked about the Good Shepherd, I talked about the shepherds in the Christmas story, but it fed into the school's work. And as I walked around town, the excitement and buzz, because we promoted it in the schools, was amazing. And when I stood and I handed out prizes, there were children from all the 4 different schools and wider who I'd done assemblies to, who were buzzing because they'd seen me on there, they'd heard about it, and now they were actively taking part in something linked to church. So maybe we need to stop thinking of our school's work as standalone and think, how can this feed into our families ministry, into our messy church, into our all-age service, and use it as a promotional tool. Yes, use it to teach the core things that we want to, but use it as a promotional tool. Toddler groups, we know, are one of these things that are kind of relationship building in the community, an easy way for people to come and make contact with church. And they do an amazing job, a fabulous job at that. They can also start those building blocks of faith in smaller children's lives and be a place where mums feel able to ask questions. But actually they're that stepping stone into something else. And I know that lots of us would love if the mums and families from our toddler groups actually transitioned and started to become part of our congregation. Let's use that to build those relationships and then tell them about the families ministry that we're doing. Another thing that you might have going at your church, which would be an amazing inflow into things, is baptisms or weddings, is families coming for those kind of big life moments, who kind of feel drawn to church in that moment but might not be drawn to church at other times. How can we get those people and feed them into our families ministry? Make them feel part of the family of the church. Make them realise that church is more than just a building, that it is a community and a family that they are welcome into. Well, one thing that we do is that whenever anyone has a baptism and they have a certificate to pick up, we invite them to come and pick it up at one of our messy church Sundays. And they get to feel and experience what that is like. And they get to be part of that family. And we find a lot of baptism families do carry on coming, and it starts to grow those relationships and those bonds more. So that kind of cold contact and people coming in from the outside, perhaps you can do the same with weddings as well. I've also got down here kids clubs, like after school clubs, things that are just for children are often great inflows into our families ministry. Because when you're engaging with the children, we know that you're not just engaging with the children, that you're going to have contact with the parents and that you're going to start building those relationships. But often it's just the children getting taught, or they're having fun, they're playing games. We've started a Lego club on Zoom, and there are Bible stories and themes through that. But actually, a big part of it is to build the relationships and make parents find it easy to sign their kids up to do things when they wouldn't maybe do it for themselves. And actually, it's that first stepping stone in relationships. And we can then go, you know what, you've been to Lego Club. I hope you enjoyed that. Why not come along to Messy Church and go a little bit deeper? The last thing I've got on here, and I'm sure there are lots of other inflows, things that are relationship building in your community that you could include on this. Food banks, uniform banks, coffee mornings. There are so many things, and some of those things might have stopped because of COVID. The last one I've put is holiday activities. Now, holidays is a time when lots of families do struggle to find things for their children to do. That's going to be a universal problem, and even more so in COVID times. So what could you do that is non-confrontational, that is easy for people to access, that just starts to build those relationships? Maybe you haven't got the team to do a full-on holiday club. Maybe you could do an open afternoon with just crafts out on the tables, or a sports afternoon where you just get loads of sports stuff on the field behind your church. All of these things flow into our families ministry and start to grow the family of God and the church family. Now, once you've got people flowing into your family's ministry, that's great. You know what? You've put on some of these activities, you've now got a flourishing messy church or other family ministry activity. But we don't just want them to stay there, because messy church is amazing, and all age services are amazing, but sometimes we can't get the depth of growth and understanding in these places. And that is the role of some of these other things, where we split off into our individual groups to dig deeper into the Word of God, to disciple each other, to journey with other Christians and find out what it is to follow Christ. And that means that actually we don't just want people to stay here, we want them to move out as well into other things. Now, we always want the family to be the core, but that doesn't mean that we can't have outflows from that. So here are some outflows that we might have. And I've put other services. Again, this is probably a little bit controversial, that actually Sunday services and other things that are going on, I think, flow out of this and that are kind of extra. But actually the services we do on a Sunday are quite often very tailored to adults. And they're great for adults, and that's fine. So actually it's an outflow that we need to have that space specifically for adults to learn and grow and go deeper. When we can't do that when there are children running around in songs, actually in Messy Church you might not feel challenged enough, and you need those other services to challenge you and grow you on your journey. I've also put Bible study groups, and a great way for us to dig deeper and to do that is to kind of section off and have Bible study groups. It might be that you could do a mum's Bible study group for mums who've come to Messy Church. There might be older person's Bible study groups. You might have special courses for Lent or Advent. Those are great outflows and just give us a chance to kind of get to know people more individually. Youth group as well might be an outflow from that. If it's not an outreach youth group, if it is a discipleship youth group where you've got young people from church who want to dig into the Bible but want to do it with their peers, then that's great. And also young leader schemes for them is an amazing outflow. Alpha Course is a great first step for a lot of people from kind of feeling part of the family, belonging in the church family. At first step in believing perhaps might be an Alpha style course. And also, actually, we want people to belong in our family. And so one of those outflows might be that they join the team in volunteering in whatever it is that we're doing. And I think our families' ministries will flourish if it has both those things. If it has things feeding into it and things feeding out of it. So if you feel that your family's ministry is starting to feel a bit stagnant, maybe it's not even got going, have a look and see if you could add one thing to both of these sides. So if it's stagnant, you've not got people, or it's starting to kind of die down, or you've not even started yet, you've not got anyone in it yet, think about how you could do one of these things that is an inflow that would start to feed into it. Maybe you could start doing assemblies which promote your family's ministry. Maybe you could start up a Mums and Tots group. Do something that feeds into this and starts to grow the numbers of people involved in your family ministry. So we started lockdown with about 80 people coming to our in-person Messy Church. Now I know a lot of you will be going, wow, that's amazing. I want that. I want 80 people. And it is amazing. And we were so blessed by that. But through the connections and doing other things that flowed into that throughout COVID and throughout lockdown, we now have over 200 people on our register for our Messy Church at home. We're sending packs to 60 families in our local area. That's families, not people. And this is because we focused on how do we do things that feed into growing this. Now, once you've got a flourishing families ministry, you also need to think about, well, where do we take these people next? We don't just want them to stay here. We want them to grow and become the amazing Jesus followers that are part of a vibrant church. So maybe you do need to think about other services to put on. Maybe you do need to think about launching some new Bible study groups or doing an Alpha course or providing opportunities for the young people who maybe feel a bit old for Messy Church. But they could help. They could be young leaders in it. There's so many opportunities. So don't let it stop you because it's not working. Don't let you feel like it's growing stagnant, but instead look at what inflows and outflows you could add to make it work again. So now we come to the fun bit of our workshop, and we're going to be talking about how we can capitalise on COVID. Now, we've figured out who our families are, we've analysed the opportunities, strengths, weaknesses and threats, we've looked at what feeds into and what feeds out of our families ministry and what's going to help it grow and thrive. And now we're going to explore some different things that will help us, especially at this time. Now, when COVID first hit, I'm sure it was a big blow to a lot of us. We had to change what we were doing. Things that had worked really well in the past no longer worked online or socially distantly. We've had to kind of change and move a lot with all sorts of ministry, really. But I have always tried to look at this with a positive lens to see what God is doing, how God is moving, how he's doing things differently during this time, and to grab the opportunities that we have wholeheartedly. Now, there's 3 things that I think have impacted why and how I've done this, and I want to share them with you. So number 1 is funding. Now, we might think that during COVID times, funding is really hard to come across because we're not in person, we're not seeing people, we can't ask them for money as easily. But actually, it's opened up some new doors to funding possibilities. The first one is your local council and grant-giving organisations. A lot of these places now have special COVID bounce-back funds that you can access, which a lot of them fund things that are taking place in the community, and a lot of our families ministry can count as that. My Messy Church packs of craft materials sent home to families who are isolating have made a huge impact in my local community, and the council have accepted that, that it's not just a religious thing, but actually it's having a positive effect on people's well-being at this time. Number 2, you could look at doing some crowdfunding. People are more open to giving online at the moment because it's one of the only ways that we can. So you can access this even if you aren't a charity, even if you aren't set up in that way. You could set up a crowdfunding page for your community project, for your church ministry. And you can share that online through all of your social media channels and gain support not only from church members but from members of the community at large, from local businesses and places like that as well. Finally, you could also look at approaching those who normally come along and seeing if they'll become regular donors now. We can obviously make the plea that times are hard and that we're low on things, and ask them to set up a standing order of just £1 or £2 a month. And having that regular income coming in will really help you be able to plan your family's ministry. Lots of it is expensive stuff. There's meals, there's craft resources, there's stuff that's going to have to be posted out. So having that kitty of funds will really help us as we move into the next thing that we're going to talk about. So the second thing I want to talk about is creativity. Obviously, COVID has changed what things we can and can't do. We can't do things in person the way that we used to, but that makes me so happy. It means we get a chance to be creative. We get chances to think outside the box, to come up with new ideas and new plans. Whether that's taking something that you already did, like Messy Church, and taking it online, trying it out in different ways, doing it socially distantly, or whether that's coming up with something completely brand new. In the middle of lockdown 1, my thought turned to the families who had been isolating and the kind of families that we had around here. And I knew that a lot of them perhaps would have gone on holiday abroad in the summer, or they would have signed the kids up to lots of different activities. Lots of these wouldn't be happening. And that would leave a big void in our families' lives for 6 weeks. And that is why I came up with this creative idea of the socially distanced staycation summer club. Now, it was sort of inspired by regular summer clubs where children would go along for a week, and a lot of churches do that already. But instead of it being for a week, it lasted the whole 6 weeks, and we mashed together the best of digital things, so videos and craft packs and resources, physical resources sent to families, but also activities that they could do socially distantly in the church or the local community. And this blended so many different things together and allowed us to be really creative. So it allowed some of our families and young leaders to record videos to be part of it. It allowed our families to send in photos to be in the Sunday shout out videos. It allowed our congregation members to take part in a flag trail around the local area and to be able to talk to the families. And the physical packs gave them activities that were tangible to do at home, so it wasn't just all digital. There were so many different touch points as well through the socially distant activities. So we did a chalk prayer path around our church, which was visited by loads of families and congregation members alike, as well as those who were just passing by. It gave us a real chance to be creative and engage the whole family of our church and the wider community. But without COVID, I would never have thought of that. God would never have planted that in my mind. It would have never have been a possibility. But like, why would we do this? So be open to thinking outside the box. Those things that perhaps wouldn't have been possible before or wouldn't have even been considered. Consider them again now. And finally, so the whole point of being funded and being creative is so that we can build community, our last thing. Now, if you go into COVID and lockdowns and the season that we're at now with this negative view that we're going to lose all of the contacts we've ever made, then that will probably happen. But if you go in with a positive view of, I'm going to build contacts, I'm going to use this opportunity that God has handed me to build up a database and a people that we are in contact with, so that when things do get back to a little bit more normal, we've got an amazing base to grow from, to contact, to tell about what we are doing now that we're back in person, now that we're able to meet together. So that was how I viewed it from lockdown 1, that I was going to try and build a database of email addresses of people that I could email. I was going to build some Facebook groups and Facebook communities. I was going to build the number of people following our church Facebook page and connected in with our social media. Because then you know what? When we put on an amazing family ministry event in the future, I can email all 300 people on that list. I can share it in our Facebook groups and I can share it on our Facebook page, and it'll be reached to thousands of people rather than the few who were maybe on our congregation email list before. You see, God knows that in the future we're going to need those channels to tell people, to shout about it, because if we put on this event and no one knows, what's even the point? But now, so many more people will know because we're in touch with so many more. And we're building community that way. So see, perhaps it's not an event that you're going to be able to put on right now, but see it as a way to build contacts and build that digital community. I'm going to stop there for today. Don't forget to download the worksheets and information sheet from the Joined Up Conference website. I'm going to finish with a prayer and to thank Father God for this time that we've had together. Father God, thank you that even though we are distanced from each other, we can still connect online. Thank you so much for the Joined Up Conference and the people that have organised it. And I pray that those watching this workshop today would be inspired for their family's ministry, would be inspired to build up their church family, that you would show them what the opportunities are, what their strengths are, but also the weaknesses and threats so that they can deal with those positively and move forward. I pray that everyone would not see COVID as a barrier, but they would see the opportunities, they would see how they could capitalise on it, and that you will just inspire them with fresh ideas so that they can grow a flourishing family ministry. Amen. Bye.